Hello and welcome to another episode of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Podcast. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong, the home of precision guided selling. And today I'm legit excited to be here with Alice Heiman. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Especially, it's always fun to be with old Miller Heiman friends. And not to say
True.
that you're old, but I mean like previous,
Yes,
previous.
previous, way previous. So, Alice, for those who don't know, Alice is founder and chief sales energizer for Alice Hyman LLC, and also the host of Sales Talk for CEOs. So it's so fun to I'm slightly intimidated to have someone here who speaks for a living to be speaking with you. So thanks for doing this.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. I'm excited about the topics we're going to cover.
Yeah, we were chatting last week and we landed on this thing pretty easily because it's something we're both, I think, kind of passionate about. And I just generally call the topic diagnosing before we prescribe. But last week we were having this chat about the problem with prescribing a solution to a problem that the customer has diagnosed themselves. So it's a little bit different than sort of we haven't diagnosed it. And I know you see this as a problem, but what are the results? What happens when we let them diagnose their own thing and then we go, okay, here's what you need?
Yeah. So I think we need to just start with a little level setting about where the customer is today when they're ready to talk to a salesperson, right?
Yep.
So back in the day when you and I were younger and we were selling and we picked up the phone to call people, they actually answered the phone. Now, I know this sounds very, crazy and mysterious to a lot of you, but we would make phone calls and people actually answered. Why? Because there was no internet and there was no way for them to find out about our products and services unless we called them. Couldn't even email them first. You'd have to send them a letter or something. So people did answer the phones and we got to talk to people and learn about them and learn about what they need and see if they needed what we had. But we were starting from scratch together, right?
Yeah.
The buyer was not knowing much about us or maybe had heard a thing or two, especially if we got introduced. And they really didn't know. And they also probably hadn't really thought through their own problem very thoroughly before they talked to us because they really weren't expecting our call. I mean, we were still cold calling, right? So I think, things were quite different then. But you hear a lot of talk about meeting the customer where they are. So where is our customer when they come to us? Well, and how is it that they arrive with this preconceived notion of what their problem is and what the solution is, right? How did they get there? And so if they're approaching us, that's probably going to be a little bit different than when we're outbounding to them.
Yes.
But even when we outbound, once they see that there's something they're interested in and they've agreed to have another appointment with us or have an appointment with us, right? Maybe we've cold called them or cold messaged them. They've agreed to have an appointment. They're still going to do some research and look around before they talk to us. So the buyer is coming to the selling team with a lot of information. They've probably asked around to their peers, which that would have happened, when we were able to reach people on the phone as well. But I think more importantly, whether it was midnight or, 6 a.m. or in the middle of the day, they went to Google and asked, about this company and got some answers. And now they probably also went to one of the AI, Perplexity, Claude, or ChatGPT, and asked some questions as well. And so they might have asked questions about their own problem and known solutions to that problem. They may have researched your company and several other companies that are competitors. They may have looked at things like G2 Crowd or other consolidator types of sites that are doing comparisons. And so they're coming to you with a lot of information. So that's a very different place. But most of our training teaches sellers to start from scratch, right? As if the buyer has no information.
Right.
And this is where we get ourselves in trouble, right? So I think that understanding that your buyer is coming to you, or your buying team. You may only get to talk to one of them in the beginning, and then you get to talk to more and more of them. But these people have their own ideas. Now, not that they didn't in the past either. It's just so much more now. And the possibility of them coming with misinformation is pretty high too, because we know that Google doesn't always provide the exact right information, and neither does AI. It can hallucinate or give us links to sources that aren't real or right.
Yeah. Well, that
And so,
yeah, I'm sorry. I want to stop you there for a
yeah,
moment because that's one of the things. Like, I think that's great. Like, I agree. Like, there's so much more. And quite a while ago, I saw the Buyer Seller Insights blog. They said there's bad buying just like there's bad selling, which is funny because we all know there's bad selling, right? But you just hit on it. So even with all that work, they're still, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they're still possibly misdiagnosing. And I think there's this heuristics bias, right? About, oh, well, this is the way I did it in the past. So even though I might be looking at this stuff, I'm going to sling this. I think this is the problem. I think this is a solution. Do you think that still exists even with all that new data?
I do. And I think that it's hard to know what you don't know. So let's say
Right.
that this buying team has found you on the internet and they're actually in the market for what you buy. Hallelujah. Right.
Yeah.
And they want to talk to you, which, we all wish for more of that. Even if they're in that place, right? They have these preconceived notions as buyers about their own problem and about
Mhm.
the solutions. So that is kind of a tough place to start if you're a seller, because you're already behind, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what those notions or ideas are, and they could have gotten misinformation also, which is not helpful. Now, let's start with the piece of understanding their own problem. So
Yeah.
this is not new, and most salespeople are not trained to deeply understand the problem. Most sellers know what they sell and what typical problems it solves for
Right.
companies, right? And they have solved those problems. Their company has solved those problems over and over again, or they would be out of business. So there's some merit to that for sure. But people don't always completely understand their problem before they seek a solution. And even if one of the buyers does, now remember, we're talking about a complex sale here, so there's
Right.
always going to be more than one buyer. Even if one of the buyers understands the problem thoroughly, do all of them understand it thoroughly, or do they only understand it from their perspective
Yeah.
in their department? Because this is where we can really go wrong, right? Because we can sell them something that they don't end up using or completely adopting. And then when it's renewal time, it gets real hard. Or when it comes time to ask them, how's it going? And, will they continue? Will they buy more? Or would they refer? The answer is going to be no, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're not satisfied. And it's not really necessarily the
Hmm.
purchase they made, the actual software or hardware or service, whatever they purchased. It's that maybe the fit wasn't there, or they didn't see the fit because the time wasn't taken in advance to make sure, right? So I think that sellers, I don't think, I know that sellers need to understand the problem they're trying to solve. Now, they understand the problems in general that their product service, solves, right? But they may not understand that problem as it exists inside that particular company and how each of those buying influences sees it. So they've got to be trained to really get past the surface questions about, the problem, the challenge, what they're trying to accomplish. And they are going to have to dig deeper to understand how it impacts each department and how it impacts each individual buyer, because we all
Mhm.
know that buying is emotional and that person feels something about that and how it's impacting them or how it might impact them in the future. So this is a lot of unraveling that has to be done. And of course, we have leaders who want us to move through the sales process
Right.
and not stop and take a lot of time to do this deep kind of discovery and understanding. Also, if you don't know how to ask the right questions, you're not going to be able to do it. And sometimes, if it's not done well, for sure, the buyers won't tolerate it.
Yeah, you know what you make me think of, and these are words that I use a lot. It's like it's that shift from hey, what's keeping you awake at night to this is what should be keeping you awake at night, which requires a whole different like what the word that comes to mind for me is diagnostics, which is different than discovery. And I
Yes.
wonder how you feel about that. Like, are we putting people in role that maybe have the capacity to do diagnostics? Are we giving them the chops they need
Oh,
to
no.
do
I mean, I
diagnostics?
rarely meet a salesperson except for somebody very senior who's been doing it a really long time, who's learned on their own to dig in at that deep
Right.
level, right?
Yeah.
So, the book Conceptual Selling, which my dad, Steve Heiman, and his partner, Bob Miller, wrote, God rest his soul, not my dad, but Bob. My dad's going to be 90. So,
Wow.
they recognized way back because, Bob was an academic as well as a salesperson. And the way he studied a lot of psychology and the way that humans make decisions, that hasn't changed, right?
Yeah.
Humans need to go through the same process to make a decision, right? But maybe they make it too quickly and without considering all of the options and possibilities. And then, especially when you're in a team, without considering all of the other people and how it appears to them, right?
Hmm.
So it takes a pretty, you know, I would say knowledgeable, expert person who knows how to have these conversations to really get to the bottom of it. So
Yeah.
I'll give you a really simple example. Someone calls and request sales training, something you and I both know very well. And we're asking questions, about why they need sales training and how many people and when they need it and, what their budget is and just kind of a typical thing, right? And coming to the conclusion that they have the budget and that our sales training seems to fit their need and, the location and the timing, everything works, right? And then somehow we find out they have a morale problem.
Right. Right.
Right now, if we went ahead and sold them that sales training and showed up and ran that sales training, everybody would be very disappointed and they would have paid a lot of money and not fixed their problem, right? But if we ask the right questions about
Hmm.
what's prompting them to need sales training, why now, what kinds of things are they hearing from their sales team that are telling them they need or want sales training, from the sales leaders, from the leadership, kind of from all angles, what is giving you these signals, and they're going to say some things that are going to make you wonder, and you're going to ask, you know questions like, sounds like there's something more there. Can you tell me more about that? Well, we've had 3 sales leaders in a row leave now, and the team is pretty discouraged. Okay, now I'm having a different conversation, right?
Right. Yeah.
So then I can talk to them more about what I've seen in the past, that training doesn't necessarily impact morale, and that there are some
Hmm.
other or better different ways, which means I'm probably not going to sell sales training today because I don't want a
Hmm.
misfit and then buyer's remorse, right?
Yeah.
So I'm probably
I
going to have to walk away.
yeah, and I love that idea. And my argument is like we should be helping people solve for like this category before we start talking about our thing. Like you're looking in this general category of enablement, and
Right.
let's figure out maybe it isn't our thing. And this was uh someone else said this to me, and I love the metaphor that, well, they didn't say this part, but there's all this dispersed knowledge in an organization, and what there's dispersed knowledge about is selling this category, right? The buyer may only buy that category once every year or a year and a half or 2 years, and I think we're missing out. I'm curious to see how you feel about this. That this is the part that somebody said to me, that buyers are like veterinarians. There's a horse, a chicken, a snake. That's what's coming in their office all day long, and they're fixing those things. They're diagnosing and fixing. Where we're like not only surgeons, we're neurospinal surgeons. We have watched this thing get sourced hundreds, thousands of times, and there's
Mhm.
this institutional knowledge that I feel like if we could get that together, Like that would help those skills we're talking about the people who have to go do it. We know more about how to buy this thing than they do. I'm
Well,
wondering
so
what your
that's
take
right.
is.
And honestly, think about it, Brian. In a lot of times, this group of buyers have never ever purchased what you're selling.
Yeah.
Never. And they don't even know how a purchase happens in their company. They've been tasked to do something, and someone probably didn't give them all the guidelines or information that they needed to do it with. Like, here's our budget, here's, what we want to do, here's how we want to. I bet they just said, hey, we need some new CRM. You go look for that and come back and
Yep.
tell us what you need, right? And part of the reason is maybe they don't even have a budget because they don't know what it costs, especially if they've never ever bought it before, right? So now they have to talk to you just to find out what it costs because it's not on your website if it's anything complex, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's an issue just in and of itself, right? They may have never ever done this before, so they don't know how to buy. And then the value that a salesperson or a sales team, a selling team, the subject matter experts and the other people involved in the team can bring is, we've seen this tens or hundreds of times because we have sold this and made it work successfully in other
Yes.
companies. So we can tell you how they did it without, divulging any secrets or IP or any names even, but we can tell you what they saw their problem as, how each department saw it, and how it fixed for each department. We can give you that information. We can help you with that, right? So we're bringing something to the table, and we know that they may not have thought about some things like you said, and we can say, yes, and have you thought about these things, right? So if we can get that good information from them, then we can start to really add value because we can tell them some things they can do that have been successful, and we can ask them questions to get them to consider some things they might not have that will make a huge difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Two things to come to mind when you're saying that. One is in my past company where we sold a lot of sales negotiation training, we would get RFPs, and RFPs were all about the event. All about the event. How long is it? What is the agenda? Is Alice going to be the facilitator? What's her background? And almost nothing about pull through. And we know where all that stuff falls down is pull through.
Right.
And that drove me. But that's all the bias in heuristic, or the way they've always bought it. And there's an opportunity for a rep there. And I would say the skill is decision making. Like, are reps really trained in, like, I used to teach decision making, so it's like I have this notion of, who are the people, what are the criteria, how are they weighted, all that sort of stuff. I feel like that stuff reps should have. I'm not going to tell you right now how to buy my stuff, my thing. I'm going to tell you how to think about sourcing this category and how you
Right.
could make that decision. I feel like there's just a ton of value that could be added there because decisions are all being delayed. So yeah, what's your perspective on that?
Yes, salespeople need to be highly skilled in leading a decision, right? Because
Yeah.
they're guiding the buyers through their journey to make the best decision possible. Very important. Now, sometimes that decision doesn't include us, but
Yeah.
the tremendous pressure that we exert on salespeople would never allow them to walk away. They have to sell, right? And this is why we have a lot of deals stuck in the pipeline, not moving anywhere, because it's really not a deal, because it's really not a fit, or we haven't
Right.
determined the fit and the value well enough to have it moving forward. So we really have to consider, as leaders, what are we asking salespeople to do? I want a fast no as much as I want a yes, so I can move on to the companies that are buying now, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And even if it's no, it's not the right time, great, I'll get back to you. Let me, schedule that and do all the things I'm supposed to do there and nurture you. But let me focus on the people who want to buy now. And I know that they do because I'm not doing all the work as a salesperson. They're doing equal work with me. They're committing to do the things that they need to do along the way to keep this deal moving forward.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it'll close, but they're committing to do all the things to find out whether it's going to work out, whether it's going to be a good fit. So, yes, sellers need more training in how to guide a decision process, right?
Yeah.
And then, they have to check in with each of the buyers. They cannot just talk to one main buyer. And I see this all the time, Brian, where they really only have one main contact.
Yeah.
And they're depending on that person for everything. And then when the deal stalls, they have no one else to
Wait,
contact and they don't
Alice,
really know why.
you know what's so funny? I can't remember who it was. And I apologize to whoever it was if he hears this, but it was a gentleman and he said, you know what really pisses me off? My guy said, and that's what you're saying. It's like, I have my guy, I have this one guy. It's not multi-threading. And that's what I completely agree. And we've been advancing this idea lately in our own thinking about thought leaders, Miller Heiman's the economic buyer, who owns the money, that kind of thing. But to me, thought leader, another area where I'm curious about your take on this, they're the people who are the unofficial lead, and it's funny. I even went to GPT and I'm like, how do you recognize them? And it's all obvious stuff. It's like they're talking and people are like, well, wait a minute. Alice is bringing something up. What's she talking about? And they have this unofficial thing, but it's tricky to like economic buyer. It's like who owns the funds, but with the thought leader, I think it's trickier, but it's important. Who has a more than equal vote unofficially, right? Well, shoot, if Alice said it, then I'm going to actually change my mind if that's what Alice thinks we should do. Yeah. Do you think that's a thing, this notion of the unofficial thought leader or decision maker?
I think there's always a decision maker.
Yeah.
And sometimes it truly is a committee, but
Yeah.
decision by committee still today doesn't even work very well, right?
No.
We're just not set up that way. There's always someone who can revoke the budget or provide more budget. And that person has to be considered, even if the salesperson never gets to talk to them. And so, how do you find out who this person is? Well, it's not easy on a Zoom call. I mean, you can try to take a look at who's, got, the most power when they speak, who, people go, oh, yeah. And they kind of shake their heads or whatever.
Yes.
You can, if you're in person, it's a little bit easier. You can watch body language. You can see where people sit. You can see where people turn their heads to. But the best way is to develop a coach. And that is to have one person on the buying team, regardless of whether they're a user buyer, economic buyer, technical buyer, or whatever you call your buyers, right?
Yeah.
That is really in favor of your solution and wants to get that in, right?
Yeah.
They want you to win, right? So they're willing to coach you and give you some information that is something they wouldn't give to anybody else. Caution, right? Be careful. There's lots of information givers out there, but a true coach wants your solution and will really give you inside information and will tell you what others are thinking and how to approach them and who's the best one to approach for certain things. And so that's really the best way in a complex deal to figure out who really holds the power, right? The purse strings. So that's not so easy to do. And I feel that a lot of salespeople don't ever figure that out. Now, not that a deal can't be closed without knowing that, because lots of deals gets closed because people want to buy something, then they're going to keep moving forward and not necessarily reveal everything to you. But if you do know who it is and you do get a great coach, you have a much better chance of closing that deal.
Yep. And I remember being frustrated by the very thing you're talking about, that where I thought I had coaches and then I realized I did have information givers that, quite frankly, they were talking to me because no one else in their organization spoke with them. So it's like they weren't a true coach. But I also think that the legacy selling thing has been, what is their decision process? And what I would say, and I think like that's what I was taught back in the day. And that used to be a question that I asked as a sales leader. And now my feeling is the decision process is broken. So understanding their decision process, it's somewhat helpful, but this is back to this, can we bias toward leading it? Can we know it better than they do? Can we bring them value added?
Right.
It's back to Jim Dickey's recent research that said salespeople are 9th of 10 places buyers go for any kind of insight. And I think this is some of the insight. Buyers also said, I'll talk to them if they have something to bring to me. So I think if we are helping maybe demystify some of these decisions, because they're struggling with it. So knowing their decision process, I don't feel is that helpful anymore.
I don't think they know their own decision process. Even
Correct.
when you ask them, they'll tell you some things. But again, that's where you can add value. Well, in the last 3 companies who purchased this, they also needed to talk to this department. IT had to do this. It went through purchasing this way. So again, you have knowledge that they don't have. So it's okay to share that with them and say, this is what I've seen before, right? And help them know how to make that decision and how to go through that journey. Because again, they may come with this preconceived notion. Tim Reister's work from Corporate Visions, they're talking a lot about these preconceived notions
Yeah.
that the buyers show up with. And where do we start with that? We can't start with the basic discovery, right? It's more understanding where they are right now. So it might start like, okay, I'm sure you've done a lot of research and you understand your problem and some of the potential solutions. Tell me how you got here now wanting to talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let
There's,
them fill you in and not
yep.
start with the old BANT method. Do you have a budget? Do you have authority? Do you have a need? And
Yep.
what is your timing? Don't do that. I mean, if they
Right.
really want to buy from you, they'll spill the beans on
Yeah.
everything you need.
Yep.
But if they don't, I mean, it's just useless to ask those questions, especially this notion of qualifying them. If they're talking to you, they're qualified to talk to you. So this very old notion of qualification, is the person I'm talking to going to be able to buy from me? The answer is absolutely not. They need a team. So
Right.
why are you trying to qualify them if they are the person or not? Of course, they know others will need to be involved. Of course, you know that, and you'll get to that, right? If you get started with just this one person, you'll get to that. But you need to treat them with the utmost respect and understand that they have done their homework as far as they think, right?
Right.
But
Right.
again, it might have brought them to this place with some preconceived notions or some misconceptions because of, the way that AI is today, and or just they heard something, right, that isn't exactly right. So you've got to kind of win them over first, helping them understand that you're going to meet them where they are. You're not going to make them back up the bus and,
Yeah.
answer a bunch of your questions. You're going to let them speak. And then you're going to ask some really smart questions to dig in. So, besides the competitors of ours that you've looked at, were there any internal solutions discussed?
Yeah.
What have you done in the past to solve this? Well, we've never had this problem before. Okay. Well, then how did this problem crop up? Right. So it's like, keep listening, keep digging, be quiet and let them answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And gather that information and be smart with your next question so that you can help guide them to what they need to do. And I mean, if the world was a perfect place, I could show up as a trusted advisor and say, wow, let's make a T-chart. Here's your problem over here. Here's all the potential solutions. Let's write down the pros and cons and see
Right.
where there's overlap so that we can then get to the next stage, right? But I would spend a little time understanding their problem first. You mentioned that you've got this problem and it's affecting these departments. Is there any other department that might be affected? And how do those other department leaders feel about getting a new solution? Because if they're not really happy, they'd rather just, the pain I know is better than the pain I don't
Yeah.
know. Just
Yep.
leave me alone. You're going to have a really tough road to move that forward. So getting as much of that kind of information versus worrying about the budget and the authority and the need and the timing up front, you're really digging into the problem, challenge, growth, whatever it is, why they're seeking your solution, and understanding how they got where they are, and how they determined these were the 3-5 solutions that they could choose from. Maybe there's another solution they hadn't even thought of.
Yep. Yeah. You hit it. And this is we got excited the other day because we both love this topic. But you really hit for me. I focus a lot on the decision side, but you're right. Like if you're solving the wrong problem, you're never going to make the right decision. So and again, I don't feel like people out there selling for a living are that like really skillfully trained at diagnostics and problem definition first and then decision making next. I'll leave you with this. I think it works in B2C as well. I have a niece, Mila, who sells real estate, And the poor kid at a Christmas party this year, I sat with Mila and I was like, "You have to be good at helping your clients make really good decisions." And she's like, "What the hell are you talking about, Uncle?" And I was like, "They don't know. Like, what are the criteria that they should be using? You know, neighborhood criteria, school criteria, fireplaces, yards, pools. Like, and do they have those criteria ranked? And are they're making emotional decisions? They're looking at, and then they might be frustrated because they got the wrong one. It's so core, the diagnostic and the problem solving. And yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate you diving
It's a
into it with me, because we all got to be talking about it more and delivering more solutions to reps.
Absolutely. It's a great question to ask the buying team. On what criteria will you base your decision? Do you
Yes.
have a scoring guide?
Yes. Yeah. Wait for classic, for anyone who hasn't done it, you can jump in GPT and get a very basic weighted attribute decision matrix, right? Who are the people? What are the criteria? How are they weighted? Now let me score my alternatives. And if people think that takes too much time, making the wrong decision takes way too much time. That'll speed it up so much more. And just the very process of deciding who should be involved, what are the criteria? How important are they? But again, you really made me think too. Do that after you know what you're solving for, and then start making what are the
Right.
criteria for making the call on what solves it best. Yeah, this is really helpful. I think anyone who isn't bringing these chops to their sales teams today needs to. So I appreciate, and you are the chief sales energizer. I love your energy today. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.